Hello everyone and welcome to our Slido Elevate event. This is our third edition and today we'll be talking all about trust. What happens when it's there, when it isn't there, how do you build it, and also why should you even care? That rhyme was not intended. Okay, but before we do that, we would like to ask you, and this is our favorite poll because we do have a global audience, where in the world are you joining us from?
So today we're actually joining you live from London. We're streaming from London, but yeah, we know we've got people from everywhere. So, and I can see that so far. Florida
is in the middle, and the way how you can join the conversation, I'm sure you figured it out, but there's a Slido button on the right-hand side where you can click on polls. So we have UK.
And we also have someone in Gujarat, so in India. So it must be some nighttime watching for you folks. So thank you so much for staying with us.
California, Germany, South Africa. Bristol, we were just talking about it. Okay.
So different parts of the UK, different parts of the US, Germany here obviously coming up in Europe. So,
but England is going strong. Okay, well, thank you so much. I can't possibly pronounce the UK town on the right hand side. Can you help me, Joe?
Wolverhampton.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Okay, it's San Jose, Köln in Germany, Arizona. Wow, Washington, Slovakia. Hello, fellow Slovak people watching from home.
Well, a distributed audience and a diverse group we've got today. So thank you all so much for joining us. We're so grateful that you've joined for this really important topic about trust.
Amazing. So moving on, we would just like to introduce ourselves. So I'm Nadia, I'm the head of thought leadership at Slido, and together with me...
I'm Joe, I'm our head of customer success at Slido.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So let's maybe answer this first question. Why are we here today? And you've probably seen this quote, and if not, you're going to get familiar with it. And I love it. It's one of my favorite ones, which is trust is the glue that holds everything together. And it's so true. Without trust, you cannot possibly build or maintain any relationship, whether it's in our personal or professional lives. And what happens in the business context? So when the trust is low, you can say that teams are just a bunch of people that happen to work together, but there's no stronger bond. You have culture of fear, you have culture of cynicism, and oftentimes you also, unfortunately, have a culture of burnout. On the other hand, there's the positive side. If you do build high-trust cultures, you have teams who feel safe, respected, motivated, and even more productive. So we can say that in today's world, when we have a lot of challenges, such as emerging technologies, we have AI coming up for us, we have hybrid work, we have market uncertainties, building and maintaining trust is more crucial than ever before. But I do have good news, because the reason and the fact that you have decided to join us today means one thing. It means that you care. You care about individuals, you care about your teams, and you care about your organizations. And I'm so pleased that today we are not alone on this journey, and we have some amazing speakers that you can look forward to. We'll be joined by the School of Life, by TomTom, by Slack, and also by Slido. And I would really like to invite you to join the conversation. We don't want you to be just passive observers. Come and join us. And you can do it again through Slido. You see that there's a little Q&A button here. I'm just going to highlight it. So pop your questions in. There'll be 2 Q&As. There'll be also live polls. And there will be a quiz, so you can win some amazing prizes. And last but not least, there's a chat option, so you can chat to us as well.
Cool. So actually, let's take a pulse on how you feel right now about trust within your organization. So how would you currently describe the current pulse of trust in your workplace? Is it strong and steady? Is it a work in progress? Or is it something that's actually more in need of a boost? It's such an intangible and difficult thing in many cases, right? But I think especially when you don't have trust, it's when you feel it the most acutely. And I can see that actually looking at these results, so for most people, it's a work in progress. And I wonder when it comes to something like trust, is the work ever actually really done, right? It's something that can be lost in an instant. So, in some ways, this was a tricky poll that we've given you here as well. But great to hear also that we've got quite a lot of people with strong and steady going on there, kind of in competition there with people who are in need of a boost. And what we're really hoping is that you'll actually get something and take something away from this time that you're spending with us today. So with that, let's take a quick look and see at what we're actually going to be covering in our session today. So we're actually going to kick off with our keynote all about high trust culture. That's going to be done by our head of user research, Neil, who'll be joining us here on the stage in a moment. After that, we'll run a quick quiz just to recap some of the key information that we learn and make sure that we're able to kind of embed that and bring that into our day-to-day. And then we'll also have a panel discussion where some of those great speakers that Nadia just mentioned will be joining us on the stage. I'm really, really looking forward to the discussion and hearing all of their amazing insights. And last but not least, if you'd like to join us afterwards, we'll be hosting a Slido masterclass. So this is where we'll actually be getting much more practical and sharing some real tips on how you can use and leverage Slido in order to build trust within your teams. So with that, let's welcome on stage Neil for our first session.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nadia. And hello, everybody. I am Neil, and what I'm going to talk about is high trust cultures. And we're going to start with a poll for you. So our question is this: what does trust at work mean to you? So what word, or perhaps short phrase, would you use to describe trust at work?
What about for you? Yeah, like what words would come to your mind straight away?
So trust at work, I think for me, it's a happy environment. I think it's one in which friendships get built as well. I'm thinking about some of the good friends I've got in my life that I've met in the workplace. I've probably met in a high trust environment. But what about you, Joe? What does it mean for you?
For me, it means ease, actually. Everything for me is so much easier to get done and to operate when you work in a high trust culture. I think, from collaboration to actually, just doing your work and actually being able to be more productive because you don't have anyone micromanaging you, which I see coming up here on the screen. I think ease is really the word that resonates with me.
I think ease is a very good one. We've got two very big ones here, safe and safety, so very closely linked there as well, and transparency, confidence in others, being flexible.
I'm also loving, I see open there, right? I think that's a really important thing, right? So you're able to be open, be yourself, be vulnerable, some of those other words that are coming up as well. So being treated as an adult, of course, right?
I think being treated as an adult is a great one, yeah.
That's really lovely.
Some good, and fun. Nice to see fun in there as well.
No fear, too. I think that's a great one. You'll be talking about fear a little bit, too.
Indeed. Okay, fantastic. Shall we move?
Yeah, let's go on. Thank you so much all for sharing those.
Okay, so here's what we're going to discuss today. So cover your eyes. This could be awkward. I'm going to talk about some horrendous stories from my life, from my working life, I should say. I'm going to talk about the stories and the thoughts that we've got from our research. And I'm going to talk about what a low trust culture looks like. But also we're going to talk about how you create a high trust culture as well. And Joe, it would not be Slido if we didn't have a Q&A. So if you start thinking of your questions, do start writing them into Slido and we can deal with them later. But yes, be warned, horrendous stories from my life coming up. And what I'm going to draw on, because I'm the research guy at Slido, of course, I'm going to draw on our research. We do qualitative research. We did some great focus group and diary study work with people who are leaders of leaders in the US, so people who've got 2 layers of people reporting into them. We also have some survey work as well, some done amongst meeting organisers. That's a sample of 5,000, and also meeting attendees, a sample of 1,000. But it's not just our own research that we like, it's also the research done by other organisations as well. So we're quite a fan of some research that's been done by other organisations. So we'll bring some of that into the story as well. And I'll draw on 25 years of leading teams. Oh my goodness, that feels like a long time, doesn't it? How time flies. I'm going to start by talking about what does it feel like when trust is missing. Be warned, horrendous story from my life coming up. Because I once worked in a place where this happened, not just once, but on a few separate occasions, where somebody senior would start work there one day and be a little bit confused by the fact that not many people really knew that they were going to be arriving that day. And other senior team members would come and greet them enthusiastically but also a little bit cautiously. Who is this new person that's just started that our CEO has appointed? And one person might say something like, "Hi, I'm the head of sales. What's your role?" Only to discover that the new person had the same job title. I'm the head of sales, and this is a bit awkward. Was that a mistake? It was not a mistake. It was very deliberate. It was done by the CEO, who did not want to be trusted at all. What he wanted was to be feared, because this was about creating a survival of the fittest culture. It was Machiavellian at its finest. And sure enough, a couple of months after this, one of those guys would not be working at that place anymore. So it was done very, very deliberately. But of course, it was not just the CEO who was untrustworthy. Mistrust ran through the organization. It was a low trust culture. And mistrust at scale is a low trust culture. Of course, trust at scale is a high trust culture, but we're just going to focus on the low trust cultures to start off with. And we're going to start by asking, what type of cultures form when trust is low? So we've got another poll for you. It's a word cloud. It's kind of like the opposite of what we were looking at earlier. And the question is this: when trust is low, there is often a culture of what? So what word would you put at the end of that sentence? When trust is low, there is often a culture of, that fear is there and it's growing and growing. Toxicity is a good one too. Individuality. Joe, what words stand out for you?
For me, I think the word would definitely be frustration, because it feels like you really can't get anything done that you're actually striving or trying to do. And right, especially when you don't have trust, that can result in a lot of inner frustration for you. What about you?
I agree entirely with that. And I'm agreeing with some of these words that are coming out here as well. Suspicion and blame, anxiety, instability. Yes, I mean, just reading these words makes me start to feel a bit nervous. Before, it looked like a word cloud describing a wonderful place to work, but this is certainly the polar opposite of that. But fear maintains its place right there in the middle.
I can imagine, right? Like, it's not just one of these things, right? If you've got a real culture of mistrust or low trust, it can actually result in many of these different things that we're seeing come up here on the word cloud. So not a pretty picture whatsoever.
Indeed. And job seeking is on there as well, and perhaps no surprise if you find yourself working in this kind of environment. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, let's carry on.
So in our research, what came out from that was that what gets established is a culture of fear. So the people we spoke to in the research were definitely in agreement with what you said in the poll just then. And here's a nice quote that typifies that. So somebody said, "I run across so many people in our organisation who are scared to reach out and ask a question because they're afraid of backstabbing." What a terrible place and environment to be able to work in. And of course, this was a very deliberate culture of fear. And of course, there was lots of backstabbing going on in that environment too. And every one of those words that we just saw in the word cloud was certainly prevalent in that workplace. I don't miss it, shall we say. And another good word, I can't remember, Joe, if this was on the word cloud, but another word that came out in the research was cynicism, that a culture of cynicism can be built. And I'm going to use another horrendous story from my working life. There was a place that I worked where there was a lot of people around who had worked in that organisation for a long period of time, but the senior team were all quite new. And what happened, this might be a very typical water cooler conversation, where somebody said, "Why do they ignore our experience?" And the answer is they just don't like that we know what won't work. And that was definitely happening. So the senior team were coming up with great ideas, great new ideas to try. But of course, the employees had seen some of those ideas before, and maybe they didn't work quite as well as the new senior team thought that they were going to work. So they expressed their point of view on that. And the senior team decided that, well, actually, maybe part of our problem is that we've got such a negative workforce. So the senior team started to mistrust everybody else. Everybody else started to grow quite cynical in that environment. And so it went on. And another word, another thing that can form in this environment is burnout. So a culture of burnout can be caused. And of course, burnout can happen for all sorts of different reasons. But I just want to talk about another horrendous story from my life about a time when I saw burnout happen because of a lack of trust. So there was a boss, and she was very, very good at what she did. So she worked in research, as I do, and she was very eminent in this world of research. But what she was not very good at was trusting her team. And what would quite often happen is that they would submit some work that they'd been doing for her to look over. And she was quite short of patience. And in her frustration, she'd say, oh, I might as well just redo all of this myself. And so she set about doing the work herself. And what happened is that it robbed the people in her team of the opportunity to get feedback from her. And it started to really kill collaboration. And worse still, it deprived them of the sense of ownership of the project that they were working on as well. So suddenly they felt that this wasn't their project anymore, that this boss was taking it over instead. And what happened was that the clock would tick around to 5:30 in the evening, and the team would start to put on their coats and head out the door and wave goodbye to her in her corner office, thinking that they had nothing more to do on the projects, but she would feel very unsupported. And slowly but surely, because she was doing their work as well as her own, she started to burn out. And it just made her even less trusting of the team. And it created a cycle, and it went round and round and down towards burnout. Bear with me one second, I'm just going to grab my water. Now, we have a poll. Have you ever worked in a low trust culture? So we have an option there for those of you that might not be sure, but maybe some of the stories that I've told, they might resonate with you, or maybe you've got different ones. But have you ever worked in a culture where trust is low?
I think it's fair to say, Neil, that you've worked in a low trust culture.
It's fair to say
right?
I have, yes. And it's fair to say a lot of people here have, Joe, as well. 83% of people.
I can't say I'm surprised. I think I've definitely worked in a couple of low trust cultures as well. I'm a bit jealous and envious of the 2% of people who've never worked in a low trust culture.
Yeah, indeed. Oh my goodness, it's now ticked into the 90s. 91%, 92% have ever worked in a low trust culture. Okay, shall we move on?
Sets us up well, doesn't it, for this next bit?
Indeed, it does. So look, if you have worked in a low trust culture, as many of you have, the first thing I want to say is that I'm sorry, it is not nice. It's not a nice environment to work in. But the second thing that I want to say is that it could be your superpower. And we'll talk about why that is. Because what kind of leaders see the need to build a high trust culture the most clearly? What we were finding in our research is that those leaders are the people who have experienced low trust cultures themselves. And here's a good quote that typifies that. So the bad bosses and the bad experiences are really what defined my style, because I wanted to do the exact opposite. And I would say that's very true for me. I would say that after working in those environments, it was great to come to a culture that is a high trust culture. And also it made me determined to contribute to a high trust culture as well. But trust often gets forgotten, which is a funny thing to say, isn't it? How we've all been talking about how important trust is, but it does often get forgotten. And we'll talk about why. So why does it get forgotten? Quite often it's because it's sort of assumed. It's kind of assumed, yeah, trust is there, isn't it? And it's not talked about explicitly for that reason. Of course, those people who have experienced a low trust culture, they're the least likely to forget about trust and the most likely to talk about it. But when we ran research and we asked people what makes for a great culture, what makes for a great working environment, we got a very long list of stuff and it was all really, really good. But trust wasn't really the most commonly spoken about thing. But when we asked people about that and said, well, where is trust in all of this? The answer that we got was, of course, trust. Trust is the cornerstone, it's the keystone, it's the glue that holds us all together. We heard all those really, really positive things, but somebody said, it's like table stakes. It's kind of there, isn't it? It's the whole reason why we're here in the first place. But actually, it's not always there. And if you don't talk about it, and if you don't kind of call it out, it can get forgotten. But the other problem with trust is it's often associated with soft metrics rather than hard metrics. So people get that it's important. Yes, of course, it's important. But when push comes to shove and the market gets hard, it's one of those things that's easy to overlook. So if you don't draw that straight line between trust and the hard metrics, then maybe it gets overlooked a little bit too easily. And we love the work that Slack have done. They've done some great research where they do make that link very overt and very obvious between feeling trusted at work and the hard metrics. Feeling trusted at work has the greatest impact on productivity, 2 times better focus and 2 times higher productivity. And they've also drawn a straight line between trust and employee retention as well. So employees who don't feel trusted are 2 times as likely to look for a new job. And some of those leaders that we spoke to, they really got it. So one person said, look, a high trust culture for me is as important as the deliverables that I'm measured against. And that's purely because it sets the right environment for those deliverables to be met. Now, who sets the culture? I'm sure that you're all thinking the same as I'm thinking. You're probably all thinking that culture is set from the top. And that's certainly what we were hearing in our research as well. Culture is set from the top down. How leaders act, how they engage with their employees, and how they lead by example. But of course, it's not just solely down to the people at the top. The tone can be set from the top, but also sustained by middle managers. And middle managers are hugely important in this story of trust. And here's another great stat from Slack. It's that managers who don't feel trusted by their bosses are 2 times as likely to express doubts about the work ethic of their direct reports. So mistrust can trickle down the same way that trust can trickle down. So if you're a middle manager, ask yourself this: are you a conduit of trust or a conduit of mistrust? Are you influencing that positive work environment, or are you someone that's bringing it down? And also, ask yourself what can be done. And what can be done is breaking the chain. So ask yourself, how can I break the chain to no longer be a conduit of mistrust? And it's not easy to do, but let's revisit those 3 scenarios that I talked about early on and look at how the chain can be broken. Starting with a culture of fear. I would say that once a culture of fear is established, it is so hard to break. It's a very difficult situation. I think it's true that a middle manager can stand in the way. They can stand between their team and the people causing that culture of fear. I've seen that work before with high-functioning teams able to do their job, but the manager spends all of their time managing the politics. But also in that situation, find out if the people at the top realize that they're setting a culture of fear, and also find out if they're happy with it. The CEO in my story was very happy with what he was doing, setting a culture of fear, but quite often people don't realize it, and they're quite mortified when they realize what they've done. Secondly, in the culture of cynicism, we had a great story from the research. One lady said that she was brought into a team purely because the team was cynical, and she was told by her CEO, I want you to focus on transforming this team. I have people who become jaded over time, which of course means cynical, but we can't afford to lose those people. And what this person did was that they set about really understanding the people in the team and understanding the value of what they had to offer, and understanding that they had a lot of experience that could be given a great platform for that experience to be shared. And actually, if you think about it in those teams, a cynical team is actually an opportunity to really get to understand them and to get to understand their experience. Burnout is broad, of course, but let me talk specifically about the story that I told you before. And it's that instinct to just do the work yourself. And of course, that needs to be fought. If you see it in other people, it needs to be called out and tackled. It's better to foster feedback, collaboration, and ownership, because what you're really doing is setting yourself up for a more positive future, even if you feel like not doing the work yourself feels like it takes longer in the first place because you're spending a lot of your time doing the feedback. Meetings and comms are a great way of instilling trust at scale, because remember, trust at scale is a high trust culture. So let's talk about that. So why meetings? Well, people in our research said meetings are a site of organizational cultural building. They also said it's incredibly important for leaders to bring the culture you want to your group and to your meetings. But it's also true that bad meetings alienate people as well. So in one of our surveys amongst meeting attendees, 43% of those meeting attendees said that they'd ever left a meeting without saying what was on their mind. What a terrible shame to think of all those lost ideas. But of those people, 1 in 3 of them said that it made them feel like they wanted another job. So that isn't that terrible. They couldn't say they're great, give their great ideas. Maybe they walked into one of your competitors, leaving you trying to find somebody to fill that role. Now we have a poll. How would you answer this question? Which of these 3 numbers do you think is the right one? How many meeting attendees would not recommend their organizations as somewhere with productive and engaging meetings? Do you think that's a third of people? Do you think it's about half? Or do you think it's about 3/4 of those meeting attendees that we talk to? What do you think, Joe? What do you think people are going to go for?
So no, it's a tough one. Based on those stats, I think it could be maybe one of the higher options that you were just sharing with us.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty scary, whatever the answer is, right?
It certainly is. It certainly is. So how many meeting attendees would not recommend their organizations as somewhere with productive and engaging meetings? We've got 52. Should we go to the reveal?
Yeah, let's do the big reveal.
Yes, you're split between half or 3/4, but actually it's 73%. So it is 3/4 of people would not recommend their organisation as somewhere with productive and engaging meetings. And even where there's a good culture as well, a third of organisations with very good cultures said that the meetings don't fully reflect the strength of that culture. So even in those places, there's always room for improvement. Live Q&A is a great form of comms. And what we found when talking about live Q&A in our focus groups is that quite often those leaders said that at the point when they're considering doing a live Q&A session, right at the last minute, they thought, maybe I won't do that. Maybe it's kind of high risk. Maybe I'm going to feel a little bit too vulnerable doing that. And what they end up doing is just sending out a survey to do the same job because that feels like it's less risk. And I get that. I understand that feels like it's less risk. You've got more time to think about what's been said and more time to come up with an appropriate answer. But consider this. What we also discovered was that when leaders do a live Q&A instead of a survey, they're seen as 22% more charismatic. They're seen as 20% more approachable and also 22% more likely to act on that feedback. So yes, it is. It's high risk, but it's also high reward. And actually, you might feel vulnerable, but that vulnerability comes across and can instill some of these elements on you. So that's all from the research. That's all from my part, Joe. But I'm going to hand over to you.
Yes, and just a reminder that we'd really like to involve you in the conversation and seeing some great questions coming through so far. So please do submit any questions that you've got also for Neil, but also for the panel later on, and do upvote the ones that are in there so we've got time to take the most impactful questions. But also, we said this event was all about sharing secrets and sharing secrets of leadership. And while we've heard a lot here about the why, what's also important is to understand how. We know why we should be building a high trust culture, but how do we actually approach that and how do we do that? And I know for certain that we've got some really amazing leaders here with us on the call today. So we'd actually really love for you to share your secrets. So it's not just all of us thinking and sharing on that as well. So start thinking about what your secrets are. In order to get the cogs thinking, I'm going to share a couple of tips as well. And I'm going to come back to the research, and that's that this lovely quote, which is that I believe that being open makes a big difference. People want to work for leaders who are living the integrity that they claim to be or share. And this is even more important in this hybrid, distributed world in which we live now, right? You've got cultural barriers, you've got technical barriers, digital barriers in order to actually be able to connect and be there with your team. And how do you actually do and enable that? How do you actually make that openness at scale now as well? And so let's take a look at some things for how you could build trust via openness. The first thing is really about building connection. How can you actually make your team not only see you as a human, but also for you to see them as humans as well, and going both ways in the conversation. And this can be really in a simple way, right? It's actually just carving out time on your one-on-ones or at the start of your meetings in order to ask some meaningful questions that enable people to open up and build that connection on things that are either related to work or outside of work as well. The second thing is really around being accessible and reliable. So how can you make yourself more prominent and more visible for your team? I think especially this is much easier when you've got a small team, right? If you've got 3, 4, 5 people, it's very easy to connect with them all one-on-one and be there for them. But as soon as you start getting to much bigger teams, into the double digits, it's much harder to be accessible. And actually using and leveraging tools like Slido for polling and Q&A really helps with this, and for doing that listening with your team. But listening isn't enough. You also need to show and display some reliability. You need to act on what you hear. One of our clients who works in government, I love that, they've got this program said, "You said, we did." And that really helps to build and increase trust within that organization, because they're taking those things that they're listening to and then they're acting on them and seeing it through and closing that loop. The last thing is really around that we've got to share is about demonstrating vulnerability. So actually just even saying and standing up there and saying, "I don't know the answer to this, I'll need to get back to you," demonstrates that you've got knowledge gaps. And that's something that can be really, really scary sometimes, to stand up and say that, as well as talking openly about failures, about mistakes. Those are really key things that can help to build trust within your organization. So hopefully that's got your cogs thinking. You managed to start thinking about some things. But we'd love for you to actually also share your secrets with us. So what have you experienced, big or small, that has helped to build trust between colleagues? So this could be something that you do as a leader. It could be something that you've seen a leader do. It could be something that you've seen with between peers or anything like that. And let's actually go through some of those as well. I love this one, Neil. Open communications. Over-communicate if necessary. I love that phrase. I am often told, when repetition is key, right? And when you're sick of saying it, that means the message is probably finally landing.
Oh, I like that one as well, yeah. Yes, it's true. It's very true.
It's such an important one as well. Let's take another one. Let's see what else we've got in here. Being proactive about things that didn't go well and opening that conversation and acknowledging what went wrong. I think that's a really key and important secret that we're getting through as well.
It's a good one. Somebody said when a manager asks for your opinion, that's another good tip.
That is a good one. It's something really small, right, that can make actually such a meaningful difference. It can make you feel that you're valued and that your opinion matters.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So such a cool one. Giving credit and accolades, something that, I think so often you're just hearing all the negative things, but actually praising a job well done is such a meaningful, has a meaningful impact as well, right?
Yep, credit where credit's due. We keep seeing the word authenticity as well. It's so important, isn't it? I think that people can really buy into you as a person as well and feel like you're being genuine.
I love this one from Jared. Having a sense of humour with each other. Bonding over humour can be a really important thing, right?
Yes, I agree entirely.
It's important to keep that on the right level. But yeah, and let's just do one more. Let's take this one. So admit when you've not done your best and act on ways to improve. So keep feedback open in both directions. And I think there's nothing better to end on than that one. So actually with that, let's actually transition over to the Q&A. We'll be sharing all of these results with you later. Obviously, we didn't have time to go through all of the poll questions today. We will put together a resource in the coming weeks in order to share with you so you can have those secrets from everyone. But we've also got a report that will be shared out with you along with the recording of this event, where you can actually learn more about the research that Neil shared and actually use that as well for building great meetings and great cultures in your organization. So yeah, let's go over to the Q&A.
Yes, so thank you so much for this amazing keynote. We have so many questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the top one with 25 likes currently, and it's a tough one. And Neil, I'm going to direct it in your direction. So what can you offer, or how can you offer feedback to leader or leadership team that you cannot trust? What would you say to our audience?
Carefully. I think you have to think very hard about what you're saying, but I think you also have to assume that it's going to land quite well, that actually if you kind of talk to them about the trust issue, that they might really engage with that, and that it might be really something that they want to fix, and start from that kind of point. But yes, but engage very, very carefully as well.
I would say, if I can add to this one, I think when going into a feedback conversation, it's actually important, especially if it's about trust, not actually going in or leading with, I can't trust you, because that will actually get someone's back up immediately. I really love the non-verbal communication feedback framework, and I think it could be really valuable for this situation. So that's like, when you did this, this made me feel like this, and the impact was this. So you can actually have that conversation in a much safer way. It's also talking about yourself and how it made you feel, instead of also just pointing the fingers and actually saying, hey, I don't trust you, which I think wouldn't be a good conversation.
Nice. The next question is actually talking about the challenges of a hybrid teams and hybrid world. And we have this challenge also at Slido because we have teammates everywhere from Tanzania and Australia to Las Vegas, right? So how do we actually bridge that gap? And the person is asking, I work in a hybrid team spread across time zones and we only see each other online. How do I build trust with people, some of whom I have never met in person? So do you have any tips for remote attendees?
I think building and creating that time for connection is super important. So actually adding in a social call, if you can actually accommodate those time zones, is a super important one. But I think also using your internal communications tools for places to connect. At Slido, we have Neil is actually our champion of our radio Slido channel, so that's where we actually share things about music. And I'm the champion of our book club channel, where actually we encourage everyone to share about books that they've been reading, right? So there are things that overlap and allow us to connect in a different level as well.
One thing I would add to that is that if you think right back to the period of lockdown and everybody had to go home and suddenly work, far more geographically spread, but connect with each other online on the new video tools that had emerged at that point. And when we did some research around that, what we expected was that we would find that people felt more distant from the people that they were, from their manager actually. But what we did find is that for some people, for at least half of people, they actually felt like they were closer, like their conversation with their manager was probably closer at this point, perhaps because they were getting more one-on-one time, kind of direct face-to-face time than they might have been used to. So it is interesting that medium can feel quite personal, especially to introverts as well. So that is something to bear in mind and something to think about.
And I would just add to this, if I can, just like the idea of couch talks. So what we've started to do is like, there's so much businessy topics that you talk about all the time, but take the opportunity to also do something that's not work related. And there's so many things that so many people are good at. And just we do this online sessions where you have a session where people can ask questions and the person who's an expert on something shares. It could be about music or travel, but this is also what people really, really appreciate when they have a little mental break. And just looking at the clock here, I'm going to take a final question. And actually, Neil, it ties back to your keynote. And it's talking about the culture of cynicism that you were talking about before. So what if I'm in a situation of cynicism of one particular team member who doesn't have trust in mid-management? Any ideas on how can I build trust here?
So the cynicism comes from somewhere. And I think the first mission is to find out exactly where it comes from and exactly what's causing it, and to kind of really dig into that. And don't assume that it's just kind of cynical by nature. Assume that something has caused that person to kind of buy out, and there must be some way that you can draw that person in. Maybe they've got something, some skill, some piece of knowledge that is really, really useful. And if you find out what it is, what is it in their experience, or what it is it in their skill set that allows you to draw that person more into what's happening in the business, I think that's kind of how you start that journey, at least. Jo, what would you add to that?
I nothing to add. I think you summed that up very nicely.
Okay, perfect. So I believe we have some wrap-up of key takeaways to close the session off. So over to you, Neil.
Oh, we do? We do indeed. Okay, so our takeaways are these, that leaders who've experienced low trust have a superpower, because they're the people who know that the opposite of trust cultures are cultures of fear and cynicism and burnout. And we saw some other terrible words in the word cloud earlier. It's also true that trust gets forgotten. Don't let it get forgotten. It's often not talked about. Make sure that doesn't happen. It's often dismissed as being too soft, and counter that by drawing a strong line between trust and the hard metrics. Trust and mistrust are set at the top and they trickle down. And if you're a middle manager in that process, then don't be a conduit of mistrust. Find a way to break the chain. And where can you start? Well, meetings and live Q&As are a great place to start. And Joe talks about being open, building connection, being accessible, and also being vulnerable too.
Nice. Thank you so much, Neil.
It's quiz time.
Yeah, so with that, we're actually going to do a quick quiz with all of you now. We'd love to actually really cement some of those things that we learned from Neil today. And we see that also with our customers, that's a really great way for us to really embed those learnings with us. And we've actually got a prize for us today. And so we'll have 3 winners. So if you're in the top 3 of the leaderboard, we've got some goodies for you from Slido and also the School of Life who are speaking with us today. So good luck. Remember, accuracy really matters, but also so does speed. So you want to get it right, but you also want to be quick in order to have a chance with winning these over. So
Good luck, everybody.
So yeah, let's go with that first question. So please join the quiz. You can do that in the sidebar, as Nadia mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And I'll just say it's a little bit tricky because you have heard answers to some questions, but you haven't heard answers to all questions. So you would also need to use your, general sense of logic and figure some things out on your own. Wow, so many people joining. Please do join. Wherever you're in the world, we'll promise to send the goodie to you, and it will be worth it. Okay?
Shall we get going?
Let's get going. 70 people joined the quiz so far. So let's just take a look at the first question. Okay, so the first question, if you were paying attention to Neil, is why does trust sometimes get forgotten? A, because trust is often associated with soft and not hard metrics. B, because of a high turnover in leadership. C, because of a failure in a transparent communication. Or D, because of rapid company growth. So while more of them could be good answers, there's one that was mentioned in the keynote. What do you think it is?
You can see we're getting quite a lot of results coming in. So we've got about half the people in. So last couple of seconds to get your votes in. So I'm about to lock the voting. Let's take a look and see what people think, shall we?
Okay.
Lots of people were listening.
Yeah, I think our smiles are already saying, what is the correct answer? You're right, 81% got it right. Trust is often associated with soft and not hard metrics. So well done, 81% of our audience.
Nice. Okay, so with that, let's move to the next question. And this one was also in Neil's presentation. So we heard about Slack's report that they've done recently, where they actually show that trust is critical for success. So in what areas do employees in high trust cultures outperform compared to those who are in low trust cultures? Is it around focus? Is it around productivity? Overall work satisfaction, or perhaps is all of the above? What do you think?
Okay.
See, we've got about half the votes in so far from the people who've joined the quiz. Let's give it another couple of seconds.
Let's see. I'm curious what people are going to say.
Nice. Shall we take a look?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Yes. So again, around 85% of you this time are correct. So it is actually all of the above.
Yes, we have some good listeners joining us today. So our third question is actually, you haven't heard it before, but it will be mentioned by our School of Life panelist, Liz. So which of this following is the most fundamental to building emotional intelligence? What do you think that you need the most? Is it confidence? Is it calmness? Is it self-awareness? Is it grit? Or is it kindness?
I think this is where we could really mix up the leaderboard here.
Yeah, let's see. Tricky.
Could definitely be any of them.
Yes, it could. But there's just one correct answer in this case that we're looking for. So let's take a look at the results. Okay, it feels like you're actually getting better and better with each round. Now 89% got it right, so well done. I think the leaderboard will be tricky to see. Self-awareness is correct, and we'll be again talking about it in a second.
So with that, we're just about to go into our last question. So if you've got all the answers correct so far, make sure you get an accurate answer, but speed will probably matter, I think, based on what we've seen so far. So for our last question, coming back to that report from Slack, how does the level of trust vary based on how long you've been with a company, according to their report? Does it decrease if you've been there for a longer amount of time? Does it increase the longer that you're with a company? Is trust only relevant for new employees? Or maybe it's the same, regardless of tenure. So what do you think? This is the last quiz question, so let us know.
Okay, over half of the people have voted already, I can see.
Nice. Maybe this one's a bit trickier. We didn't give this one away as a clue either, I don't think. Earlier, so.
Well, let's see what people think. If it's about 89%, then I'm giving up.
Let's see what people think.
Oh, okay.
A bit more variety this time. So yeah, nobody thinks it's only relevant for new employees. But yeah, the majority of you are correct. So yeah, trust is the same, regardless of how long you have been with a company.
Okay, and here comes the suspense, because we're going to take a look at the leaderboard. So let's have a look. Okay, well, congratulations, Mitchell, for winning our quiz, followed by Robin and Anne. So please send us an email at events@slido.com, and we'll be sending all these amazing rewards and your way.
Over to you soon.